Welcome to the Endo podcast. This week, alongside Liz Douglas, we are talking healthcare, systems, discrimination at work, and more. As always, this podcast is brought to you in proud partnership with Period Harmony. So it's Liz Douglas. By the way, that is a Scottish name.
So going way back when, my great grandparents' side, that's where the Douglas comes from. So they were Scottish. So I have Scottish and Irish and Welsh and British. So I actually changed my name legally to take on great grandparents' Douglas last name.
Amazing. I love that. So, Liz, if you could tell us a bit about you and what you do for a living and your endo journey.
So I go by Liz. I am she, her. I am a single mom of a beautiful kiddo that has also helped me with my endo journey too. So he's probably like the most knowledgeable 10-year-old in his group about women's health.
I was about to ask.
California. I work in business development with a lot of emerging tech. That's been my background, working in satellites and aerospace and automation. It's taken me all over the world, and I've gotten to work on a lot of interesting projects from it that have involved climate science and advanced like oceanography using robotics. So it's been quite the journey. Yes, very different from when I was going to uni. I was studying comparative literature with Lord Byron, but I love the field.
Excellent.
As part of my endo journey, it really started like doing the deep dive into the endo journey because I would have problems, but nobody mentioned endometriosis from the time I was 12, just, recently up until last June. It's actually coming up to when I first got the read from my surgeon who ultimately did my excision surgery as of last year. But the symptoms have been there since my very first period. The symptoms got worse over the last 5 years. And I believe that is very much attributed to the trauma and the assault that I experienced. And so I would go to these doctors. It's awful. Yes. And
I'm so sorry
the
to hear that.
connection between that, I'm so grateful for my surgeon who also recognized this holistic approach of endometriosis, that it wasn't just, it's just a women's health problem that's just gynecological, right? It is a whole body and also mind and emotional. It's all connected. So she didn't view it as this siloed thing, and was deeply appreciative of that. And I had to go to a number of different doctors because I was bleeding for months. I was bleeding for months on end. I had golf ball size clots, blood clots. And all the doctors that I had previous to this were like, oh, we don't know. We don't know what's wrong with you. Your blood's normal.
Did they not investigate before?
It's your fibroids. Every woman has fibroids. It'll go away. It was very dismissive.
I don't think that's accurate. I don't think every woman has fibroids. But what I do know is that endometriosis does not show on an ultrasound. So the doctors, they know that. So I'm really sorry to hear that. It sounds like a very similar situation in the UK, to be honest. They say the average time is 9 years. It might have changed, but when I was diagnosed, they said that, and I was 9 years on the button. So my period had started at 11, and then I got my first burst cyst at 14. But because it was burst, they didn't operate, and I wasn't diagnosed until I was 23. So I was spot on 9 years, and I hadn't even heard the word endometriosis until I was 23. So the fact that it was left, and I was on medication every month as well, so they knew I was in pain, but no investigation
it's
at all.
Absolutely field that she said. I also had an MRI, so they couldn't find it on the ultrasound, but she found it on the MRI. She said, I'm looking at it here. You have endo. And she's like, nobody's ever told you this?
I think they can see it sometimes on an MRI. I think if it doesn't show on an MRI, it doesn't rule it out. But like you can still have it. But if it's bad enough, it does show. Mine showed on the MRI as well. So I think that's when you know it's quite serious. But I know I just hear more and more of these stories through what I'm doing in just life. What I'm sad about is I was diagnosed in 2008, and I don't see a lot of change. And I'm like, that's a long time ago. That's 17 years ago. I want to see more. Everybody wants to see more change, but I'm like, younger women like yourself, I'm like, why are you going through what I went through two decades ago? I thought we'd moved on from that. And that's why I was so keen to speak with you, is because I've been putting things up on my page about rights and disability status with endometriosis, and here there's no clear answer. It's more on symptoms. And I really, really wanted to chat with you about your knowledge of that, because I do have a lot of people on my page from the USA, and I feel like I'm giving a UK perspective, but nothing more, you know? So I was going to ask you, if it's all right, some questions about how it works over there. I know you're in California, it might not be the same in every state,
Right.
but
You're
by your
absolutely
knowledge. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, and it might be the same, it might depend on symptoms, but is endometriosis deemed as a
so
disability in the US?
there's a blue book, what it's called, for assigning like official disabilities to get disability. It is not listed as one of
Right.
those. Blue book, the Social Security
Right.
Administration, I believe, is the one that has this.
Going to say, what's the name of the blue book? I'm going to give that a Google.
Yeah, it's like the SS. It has a listing of different conditions that are deemed like qualified for disability. But it also there's a catch to that, because they have to also say, all right, well, you're disabled and you're not able-bodied to work. And this term is being tossed around a lot in the current media because of the big Trump budget that's going around, when they're talking about denying Medicaid for or having Medicaid for people, but they have to be, if they're able-bodied, they have to work for 80 hours a month in order to receive it. 80
So
hours a month. So if that's a problem for people with endometriosis, especially low income, that are trying to get not only disability but Medicaid, they can't, they'll have this inability to access it, because if this bill goes through, it will force people to do that 80 hours of work a month, and that's just not a possibility.
then what about able-minded as well?
From experience on trying to get California disability, they don't even recognize if your mental health professional submits a letter for you to try to get short-term disability. They're like, no, it has to come from your PCP, your primary care physician. It cannot come from a mental health physician or a licensed clinical worker that will help diagnose these different.
Oh, for the payments. So is that the same for every condition? It needs to come from your primary, we call it a GP here, a general practitioner. So for applying for any money, the information comes
Right.
from the primary provider. Right. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not sure that's the same here. I think you can do that, but I think other professionals can be involved in that as well. And that was what I was going to say. With endometriosis not being in this book, are people with endometriosis
They
able
could
to even apply for
but it would
disability?
be really, really hard to get, like exceptionally difficult. The hurdles that they put in place, one example is that they may have their own physician try to assess you. And what is a government physician who has no prior knowledge or
Right.
experience working with you gonna actually know about endometriosis? And they probably don't have any endometriosis training either. So if they see you and they feel that your endometriosis does not impact your ability to work based on maybe a 1 hour interview, maybe if you get that much time.
So there's going
A
to be
lot of
bias there as well. If they're working for the department that gives the money,
yes, so if
is it
they're
the Social
working for
Security? Yeah.
at the federal level, Social Security disability benefits, you can get also like short-term and long-term disability. But if you're applying for that, it's they put up hurdles. Their whole intent is to deny as many people as possible, is my impression of how the system is.
Course. So if these people are employed by them, they're going to have a bias, 100%. There's always going to be, I think there is assessors here that assess people, but I think they have to take an awful lot of other things into consideration. Like, it sounds similar, but it does also sound different as well. So with Endo alone, is there any point in even applying for any disability money?
Yes,
state
I
or
do think,
federal?
I mean, my whole process was terrible. My experience was terrible applying it at the state level. I did not apply for it at the federal level.
I'm
I
so
basically
sorry.
had to go in 2 weeks after my surgery and try to fight for my disability. So I have my, surgical girdle on, had to have somebody else drive me to the office and wait with me because I couldn't drive myself after this excision surgery and fight for my benefits in person when they
Of
only
course.
have two people working to service a very, very wide area. I mean, California has a huge amount of people. Even in the county that I live in, it's more people than some states. And so they have like a very limited window you
Right,
can come
okay.
in to apply. I mean, it was terrible the amount of work that I had to put into it and probably contributed to a longer recovery period for me.
Of course. I mean, the fact that you had to go there in person 2 weeks after an operation, I mean, you should be physically recuperating, mentally recuperating, the stress. I mean, that's got to have affected your healing. It's got to have, whether you know or not, because you don't know what would have happened otherwise. But that's outrageous. That's just not
It was not
okay at
okay at
all.
all.
I'm so sorry that
You're
happened to
absolutely
you.
right. It was a terrible process. I did apply for it because I mean, I needed the money to pay rent. I needed, to live. So I didn't have any other
Of
choice.
course.
And so I know other
Yeah.
people are faced with that where they have no other choice but to go in there. There were people that, were in wheelchairs and had other people helping them too that really should not have been in the office that day at home recuperating just like me.
Yeah, I mean, it can be the same here. We have, because it all goes on symptoms, there are people in this country who are terminally ill that aren't entitled to benefits. And because it's all symptom based, that just doesn't make sense to me at all. Like, if they're not able to work or anything else, they've paid into the system for years and years and years. And then, oh no, you don't have enough symptoms, so you can't get any back out. It's outrageous. How long does the application
Right. So, I
process
mean, it really
take
depends
over there?
person to person, I feel. At the state level,
Mhm.
I applied online and then heard nothing back for over a month. So I applied before my surgery, thinking that this was going to, well before my surgery, thinking that this was going to get through. I had both my surgeon and my PCP. I was prepared.
Yeah.
And even
You were
then,
prepared.
I had
Yeah,
to go
exactly.
after my
Yeah.
surgery and get this sorted. So that took and it got sorted like at the end. So it was about 2 months for me to actually receive the first payment, which was incredibly
For two
stressful.
months.
And
What they do here is, I had a friend tell me that it can take a similar sort of length of time, but they will then backdate the money to the day that you applied. Is
yes,
that how it works
typically,
over
but
there
if
as
it gets
well?
caught up in a
Yes.
paperwork problem or systems aren't matching
Uh-huh.
with others. Mine was problematic because I was also on unemployment, and you cannot receive unemployment and disability at the same time. It's either one or the other.
Or can you not? So that's totally different here. We've got the unemployment benefit is now, there used to be different names and now everything's called universal credit. And I believe you can actually apply for that now if you're working low income or low hours. But the personal independence payment is, and then Scotland's got their own one called ADP, I think adult disability payment. You can get that even if you're working full time. And you can also get it while you're getting universal credit. They don't affect each other. It all sounds really, really good, and I put a post up about it to let people know what they're entitled to. But you could probably hear in the comments, that yeah, this is on paper, this is what you can get, but
What you
getting
gonna
it is not the same as what you're, entitled to. Some I think I'm not sure if this is true because I don't know it for certain, but I've been told that the people that work there actually get bonuses for getting people off of the benefit. So
that
whether that's
wouldn't
true or
surprise
not, I'm
me
not
either.
sure, but it wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, it sounds good
No,
on paper, but and that's just led me on to, so you were successful in getting this payment, and is it a long term payment now,
yes.
or
So mine
is it
was mine was
temporarily while
short
you
term,
recover?
to cover the surgery and the recovery time. That lasted for me, it was initially supposed to be 1 month. And I had to do 2 months because my recovery was from the surgery, and it was a big surgery. It was not only for the endometriosis, it was to treat my fibroids and my adenomyosis. Lucky to have all three.
Yes, so I had adenomyosis as well. I didn't have fibroids. I think my mum had fibroids. I'm not super
Right.
sure. What are
Yes, so
fibroids?
there are
It's not
benign
something I've
tumors
looked
that are growing
into.
in your uterus, and there's different types. The ones that were causing me particular, like a lot of pain, contributing to a lot of that bleeding, that for months that I was talking about earlier, they were called submucosal fibroids, and those have to be
Right.
treated in a specific way that's
Uh-huh.
different from just going in and excising them. The way that they treated my fibroids was through
Right.
radio frequency ablation, and that was through a specialist. There's only in the Bay Area, I think, two people that do it with this particular system called the Sonata system.
I'm going to
Yes.
have a look at that. That sounds really interesting. We've either not got that here or I've not heard of it.
Radio
So,
frequency
radio
ablation.
frequency, you said. And how did it go? How did your operation go? Was it
It's helped,
successful? Has
like,
it
I have
helped you?
some symptoms have subsided and some have I have new symptoms now. So that I didn't have previous to surgery. So the ones that subsided is I had lower back pain. It comes and goes, but it was constant lower back pain, which I believe was from the endo that was growing on my uteral sacral ligament. So they excised that, and the back pain started to recede. I used to have like a heating pad every night, and hip pain was associated with it too.
Was it over
One
the whole of your
state,
back
yeah,
or
it
was
was
it
one on my
one-sided
lower right
or?
hand side.
That's really interesting because I had pain on my lower left hand side every month when I was having my period. And I asked about could this be endometriosis on my sciatic nerve? And I was just told no. Yeah, since I've had my hysterectomy and I've not had a period, I haven't had that pain. So I'm like, well, okay. But the main thing is the pain's gone. So
So
are you still
it did
having that pain at the
not
moment?
typically. It comes and goes. Usually the right hip pain is gone.
Uh-huh.
I used to have pain also whenever I would have my period, and
Excellent.
this was since I was 12. I wouldn't be able to walk because I'd be in pain going down my right leg. That would make it so that I was just, yes.
Won't
So that's
radiate
gone.
down. I've heard of that.
That's a
Yeah,
success.
yeah. I mean, that's gone.
Some of the new
Excellent.
things that
That's
have
good to
happened
hear.
because they did it laparoscopically for the endo was I started to get muscle spasms in my obliques, specifically on the right side.
Hmm.
It would happen at moments,
Right.
usually when sitting down. Like I'm actually pretty active because that is the when I feel best when I'm running. So it wasn't happening when I was exercising.
Yeah.
It would be a sudden, sharp muscle spasm, sometimes at scary times when I was driving, like just driving my son to his very concerning.
God.
So they had to
Right.
put me on some
Yeah.
muscle
Yeah, that's
relaxers
scary.
for that. So I'm sure that has something to do with the actual surgical
Right.
procedure. And then some scar tissue developed at one of the incision sites where I've had to have steroid injections at the incision site. I have another one coming up, even though it's been close to a year since the surgery, but it's like this tissue that has that. It's funny because they went in there to fix tissue that from the endo, and then now I have scar tissue that's making my
Now,
pelvic
yeah,
floor.
I know it feels with endo like a never ending. Even now, I've not got any ovaries, cervix, everything is like radical, it's gone. I had lost one of my ovaries in my 20s, but it's all the rest, it's gone now, and I'm on progesterone. And usually, if you've had your uterus taken out, you don't need progesterone. However, it's to stop the endometriosis coming back on the scar tissue. So I'm like sitting here and I've had radical that's still not a cure, that there's still a chance it's going to come back. And then a niggling in the back of my head. But I've been controlled by this illness for so many years that it's became second nature. So I'm not sitting worrying about it. But you're younger, and it's reminding me of my experience where one thing would lead to another. I got put on a chemical menopause, but then that caused problems with my mood, and then that led from there to the next thing, to medication, to weight gain, to everything. Like you're saying, holistically, it just affects
Absolutely everything.
absolutely everything. How are you at the moment? You feeling
We know that we'll have to do another MRI in the fall,
good?
like
Good.
after the year mark, just to see like how everything has gone and how everything has progressed. But
Yes.
I just did a marathon actually in April, which I was doing. It was very
Well
emotional for me.
done.
It was in Brighton. It was in the UK. So it was yes, I love Brighton.
Brian, we were here. Right, okay. So I seen that actually on your Instagram. I saw that and I was like, I wonder. And then I thought, you know how a lot of places in the USA have the same names as places in the UK? I was like, oh, it's probably like a
Oh,
different Brighton. So that was Brighton
it,
here. I've
I
never been.
loved it. It was
Apparently, it's
so
fabulous.
fabulous.
Did you like it?
Such a one of the actually the best marathon I've ever got to run. That was number 7 for me. And so such a great welcoming. It's like almost the entire city came out to cheer all the runners on. Great energy from the crowd, great energy from the runners. They were like, "Oh, you have to at 1 mile marker turn at Fat Boy Slim's house." And sure enough, he was out there DJing. So, like, yeah, it was
Brilliant. That sounds so much fun. No, I've heard it's just a wonderful
such a good
place. It's
vibe.
very relaxed. There's a good vibe, quite bohemian. Like my mum's been a few times and she says that I would love it. And I'm like, yeah. But the thing we have at the moment is it's actually cheaper to go out the country abroad on holiday than it is to stay in the country. And then obviously we want
Yeah.
better weather, so we're more likely to do that. But no, it's somewhere I'd love to see. So I was gonna ask about
Health
obviously
insurance.
health insurance wise, because I know you have insurance for your work, but does that cover endometriosis
So
adequately, do
I
you
have a
think?
unique experience with health insurance, having seen it from the perspective of how it's covered by work, how it's covered by the state, and then how it's covered by
Yep,
my most recent job
yep.
did not provide me any health insurance. So I had to buy it individually off the market. So I want to start from there
Oh, right.
because it was incredibly confusing
Mhm,
and the care that I needed to receive in these past months post surgery has been incredibly difficult through the individual market. So, when you do not have health insurance in the US, usually around December time, you have to go and buy it what's called like the health
mhm,
insurance marketplace. In California, you can buy it there. You can also buy it individually direct from the insurance company. You don't have to go on marketplace, but if you go on the marketplace, you might be able to
mhm.
get federal subsidies to help cover the cost. Doubt that's going to be there this year.
But this is so interesting because I've always kind of wondered this. If somebody just doesn't have, sorry, I've kind of interjected, but if someone just doesn't have
Right.
medical insurance for whatever reason, can they just
They
not go to
could.
hospital? Like, how
Think
does
there
that
are
work?
fines assessed if you do not have insurance, which is wild. In California, you have what's called
Right.
Medi-Cal, which is actually really, really good. And I'm a strong advocate for Medi-Cal for everybody in California. We're the 4th largest economy in the world. We should be able to have this, which is essentially universal healthcare. And I've been on Medi-Cal, and Medi-Cal will pay for your surgery. It will pay for your follow-up appointments and also the pre-surgery appointments as well. I think the
Right.
biggest hurdle that I had was with pelvic floor physical therapy, which my surgeon recommended both pre and post surgery. Usually you have to pay that out of pocket regardless if you have insurance or not,
Hmm.
because there are just so few pelvic floor physical therapists and it's a challenge.
Right. Yeah. So that would be similar here. The NHS, we obviously have the NHS, and I've spoken a lot about that on my page and things like that. But we don't have access to those more holistic things. They would be done privately. I think you can get referred by the NHS, but the waiting lists are
You
years
have
and
to go
years
private.
long and things like that. But we never have to worry about medication, for example. In England, prescriptions you still have to pay, but it's like a
Oh,
fixed
that's
amount
wonderful.
and there's like a cap. I'm not sure what it is because in Scotland prescriptions are completely free. If you're a millionaire, your prescription is still completely free. So I'd like to see the rest of the UK coming on board with that. So does the medical cover
It's
medication
completely
or
free.
is that out your own
So
pocket?
yes, it's really
It
great.
does. That's good.
I think the only hurdle with navigating, well, not the only hurdle, but the biggest hurdle I feel is you have to go through this complex system of like selecting what HMO that you're going to be on. And
Mhm.
it's, if you don't know, which provider. So my surgeon accepted Medi-Cal, but you had to be under a specific type of Medi-Cal and you have to select it as the person that's covered. But if you don't know the ins and outs of that, and especially if you're a non-native speaker, I think about my grandmother all the time who like if she had to deal
Right.
with this
Yep.
system, she wouldn't be able to navigate it as a non-native English speaker when all the information out there is usually in
Okay.
English. There are others, but languages that are served. But I mean, it's just not easy to find unless you are advocating.
It sounds like it's really, really difficult to navigate. It's frying my brain because we just go to the doctors, they give us a prescription, they go to the hospital, we get the care. I'm not saying it's the best care in the world, it's not, you know, but it's there and we never have to worry we're not going to have it, or we've not filled in a form right, or we don't know which doctor accepts what.
I was,
So I'd be so
well,
lost and confused in that. Yeah, we're talking there's going to be people that aren't native English speakers. There's going to be people with severe mental health problems. There's going to be people with disabilities that affect things like dyslexia, where the form filter, like there's so much going on there that if it's going to be difficult for me or you, it's going to be
oh,
really bad for, like, example,
I
non-English
was in the
speaker.
disability
That's
office and
horrendous.
I was overhearing a conversation where actually somebody had help filling those forms out and their social worker filled the forms out wrong. And then they had to go through this whole process of fighting for their payments. And at this point, they had been not, they hadn't been paid for 10 weeks, like just living off of zero, which in California is impossible. Like you can't live off of no money in 10
No, it's
weeks.
not. That's actually led me on to something else that I was going to ask you. We've got a place here called Citizens Advice, and it's independent. Like, I'm actually not sure. I should know this if it's a charity or a non-profit, but they're not social work. They're a place you can go, and there's ones locally in most places. There's becoming less and less. They could help with welfare rights, filling in forms, and telling you what you're actually entitled to. So I know you were saying about the social worker there, but is there an equivalent to Citizens Advice in the US?
Again, you have to do the research to even see, and it's so disparate. A lot of what I discovered actually under COVID times was that in the state of California,
Yeah.
a lot of the health decisions are left up to the localities. So it's like you'll have some health directives given from the state, but
Yeah.
actually it is so different from like locality to locality. And so you saw this come up a lot in COVID where there would be, you could go be in one county and then they'd have different, you'd go like just 5 minutes up the road and then they'd have like different regulations, restrictions, whatever.
I know I'm asking you these questions as if,
Yeah,
you know, the whole of the US is like one place.
even statewide,
Even state-wise,
it's
you're saying it's
terrible.
different in different localities. So I think it can be the same here. There's charities that maybe only exist in one area, but Citizens Advice is one that, like, across the whole of the United Kingdom, it exists, it's known, people have heard of it. In the US or
I would say
California,
like you'd have to look on the locality basis, at least in California. And then on a state by state basis with endometriosis at like a higher level, I have found like there was this charity called Endo Excision for All, where you can apply to have a grant
right?
basically to help you get excision surgery, not ablation, excision for your endo, which is one of the few charities that I found that
Good.
actually provides funding for people that need surgery. And, you know, there is a big income disparity.
Is that in
It's across
California
the states.
or
So
across the
anybody from
states?
the US. Yes.
That's brilliant. But you had to dig to find that information. You know, like you had to go and dig for it. It's not
It's,
like freely available. That's so interesting. I'm going to look that up. Have you, another thing I want to ask you is work wise, I know it can be difficult to talk about current employment, but in the past, have you ever experienced any kind of discrimination, absences? You know, like for your endometriosis, because it is still very widely misunderstood.
I was very, very clear. I also did all the right things and covered everything. I got letters from my doctors that would, because we have the Americans with Disability Act for now, caveated for now. It's like, we have it, but fingers crossed.
Yeah,
But
fingers
for now, we
crossed.
have, protections at the federal
Yeah.
level. In the state of California, actually has stronger protections than the federal level for people with disabilities. So I feel very, very privileged to live in this state where
All
it
right.
protects people even more if you have disabilities, but you do have to go through a
Right.
process. I mean, you have to let your employer know. You're not required to tell them what your diagnosis is, but I did find it easier to just be like, hey, this is what I have. I have endometriosis. I have fibroids. I'm going to
Yes.
require a much
Yes.
larger surgery. And
Mhm.
I have symptoms. I had doctor's notes about what actually helps me with my symptoms, which was exercise. My surgeon, when I told her, like, hey, can you write me a note?
Excellent.
And he said, the weirdest thing is I feel best when I'm running. And when I was having periods, one of the
But
things I
that's
didn't talk about
amazing.
is I don't have periods anymore because I have an IUD put in after the surgery, but I don't have periods, which is very helpful. So,
Right, right. Is it helping? I
yes,
had it was a Mirena coil. We call it a coil here, but it was an IUD, the Mirena that I had, and then I didn't have periods for the whole time I was on it. I've heard people that have bled the full time they were on it. I've heard different
yeah,
experiences,
but it's not,
but for
it's
me, it stopped the bleeding.
in. I was bleeding. When they took it out to start to investigate further why I was just
Right.
bleeding all the time for months, the periods came back. I was
Yeah.
getting migraines. I was hurting. That pain down the leg came, all of this was intensified. It was just getting worse and worse. And so I let my employer know at the time what was going on, how it was affecting me. And I felt ridiculed
Yeah.
when I was like, hey, I can't
Yeah.
work on this right now. I have a migraine. And they're like, well, this is due on a time limit. And I woke up after taking my medication for the migraine at 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, okay, I feel somewhat better. Worked on a document till 1 in the morning and still got ridiculed for having the migraine. I'm like, I wasn't trying to shirk my responsibility here.
No, it's like a genuine thing. So
And it
yeah,
was,
I mean, so that's not even
yeah,
endometriosis, that's a migraine. So most people should be able to relate to
you're
that, but they've
so much
still
older.
mistreated there and ridiculed. And for you
Yeah,
to feel ridiculed
very
is
different.
just, that's just horrendous.
And
Like, it's just, that's
got
not good at
ridiculed
all.
for taking the exercise breaks that my doctor actually wrote the letter and said, hey, these are the accommodations that she needs at work. She needs exercise breaks. She needs to be able to work from home. These were written into my letter, and I
Oh,
still was
excellent.
punished for that by the employer that actually ended up laying me off. And I do feel like they laid me off because of what I was going through. It was odd timing too, because it
Absolutely.
was 2 weeks after I told my boss, "Hey, my surgery, I think it's going to be a much larger surgery than what I initially had planned for the fibroids." There was one doctor telling me that I needed a hysterectomy. I was like, "I'm going to need a lot more time off than I initially thought." And 2 weeks later, I was gone.
Mhm.
So you can lose your job.
So I get that really, really mirrors an experience I had when I was younger. So my employer at the moment, they're fantastic. They're just brilliant. They understand, they listen, they years ago I was working and I loved the job. I had just graduated from uni a couple of years before and it was a job related to my degree. I really enjoyed it. But I was on a temporary funding. So I got told that my funding had been extended and I'd been made permanent and I was over the moon and I was all happy. And then a couple of days later, I got my letter for my first big operation. I'd had a diagnostic laparoscopy where they couldn't do much. So I was then in the chemical menopause for 10 months. And then I got my letter for the operation. Me, 23 years old, doing the right thing, takes the letter in to my boss. Oh, I've got my operation coming up. It's in January. So this was December, right before Christmas. And she took the letter. And we were actually friends outside of work as well, which was quite sad. She would come to my house. She was more friends with my mum, but she'd come over at New Year and things like that. And so I'd been told, yep, the funding's there. Then 2 days after I gave them the letter, oh, there had been a mistake. That was a mistake. the funding's not there. So I wasn't even made redundant because I had a temporary contract. There was just like, oh yeah, you're on permanent. No, actually, sorry, that was a mistake. There's no funding for you. And there was just nothing I could do about it. But I felt so let down, and I felt emotionally it affected me so much. It affected my mental health. It affected me financially as well. Like, I was still young and I lived at home, but it was actually horrendous. And again, this is still happening, and it's
It's
20 years later nearly. It's
terrible.
awful.
I'm so sorry you had that.
It's awful. And the last thing I was going to ask you, while I've got somebody, because this is gold for me to be able to talk to somebody from the US, and thank you so much for this. What advice would you give to somebody that is wanting to apply for benefits, disability welfare, anything, that has endometriosis and isn't quite sure like where to start?
First and foremost, it has to be documented by your
Thank
doctor.
you.
Like, get that documentation because that is what they're going to look at for these disability benefits. And get like two, three, four, as many opinions as you want until you get the correct, like, this is what you need to apply. You're going to have
Right.
patience and take mental health days to do it. It is, and I recommend, and this is something that I didn't do for myself,
Yeah.
but if I were to go back and do this, I would get somebody to help me. I would receive people ask, "What can I do to help?" After you're diagnosed all the time. I'd actually get somebody to help me fill out the paperwork, even though I know I can do it all by myself. But having
Yeah.
somebody there and having somebody to be like, "Hey, let me take off some of the burden," even if it's just to fill out basic information, can be such a
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really good advice. I mean, you could be the most articulate person in the world, but having somebody else, as you say, taking a little bit of the load off you, but also somebody with fresh eyes writing it about you instead of you writing it about you, it's more impactful, I think. But over here, I would say it is anyway. So that's excellent
document
advice. Anything
everything and how it
else?
impacts your day-to-day life and ability to work. If you cannot walk, like some of these symptoms, like it presented in me where I could not walk, you got to document that and get it also documented with your doctor because they're going to look in the
So make sure that you're writing down like your worst days. You know, not saying, oh, that's happening every single day I can't walk, because that's like not the case, unless that is the case, but making sure that you're saying, on my worst
yes,
days, this is what can happen to
yes.
me.
Also with endometriosis and with these disability benefits, if you're offered a surgery and you get scheduled for that surgery and you're having second thoughts, you will get disability benefits if you have the surgery. You're more likely to get the disability benefits then, but then not getting that surgery to get the excision surgery for it. Because oftentimes they want to see that
Right.
there's some sort of treatment plan. And usually it's like at the extreme events of this type of surgery. And if your endometriosis
Right.
experience necessitates that, then go for it. There are abilities to like through that charity, like the Endo Excision for All, that you can apply.
Yeah, I've written that down. I'm going to make sure we get that out there, Liz, because that's amazing, especially if that's like right across the states. That's absolutely brilliant. But it's just about it's the same with everything, isn't it? It's getting the word out. It's getting the word out there and
Yeah.
making sure people know what they're entitled to.
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you, and I hope that your healing journey continues
Yes.
and you're
I
able to run your marathons. And it's been amazing to talk to you and hear such helpful information and hearing the contrast as well, but also hearing the similarities. You know, it's all different here, but it's the same thing, if that makes sense. I know you touched on something earlier actually that I'm going to bring up again about, you know, being one of the richest countries in the world. So I say that here in the UK, I'm like, well, we're going through the cost of living crisis. We're going through, the prices are through the roof. This is happening, that's happening. It's COVID's fault. It's this, it's that, you know, all back and forward. I'm not super political, so I don't know. But what I do know is that this is one of the richest countries in the world, and there are people that cannot afford food. And I'm like, that's not okay. Like that's not, and that's, I'm not going to go into that because that'd be a whole other hour and a whole other topic not related to endo. But yeah, it sounds like we're having similar struggles, and I just hope it gets better for both countries. And I hope that
Thank you so
you
much.
feel
Yes,
well
and I hope
soon.
that you're feeling, I mean, one of the things that
Thank
I was
you.
talking about with a doctor last night on a panel about menopause and hormones, even having the surgical menopause that you did, like with your endometriosis, that your journey continues.